Yeah, I think the biggest challenge as an entrepreneur is to being true to yourself. You know your strengths, you know your weaknesses, and the entire world will try and tell you how you should cover up for your weaknesses, which is good, which is a direction you should take. But you're going to really excel if you focus on your strengths.
Yeah. So, hi guys,
Yeah.
welcome to the first episode of the podcast. I know you guys are really excited to know who the guest is. I'd like to introduce all of you to Raj Singh Nimbalkar. He's a very dear friend, he's a mentor, he's someone who inspires me and has been inspiring me for a very long time. Just to give you a brief background about him, he's someone who dropped out of his college, he started multiple companies along the way. He dropped out in his second year, which was quite early as well. Ever since then, he has gone on to form multiple companies, and here he is today as one of the most successful entrepreneurs in my entire circle. And it's an honor to have him as the first guest on the podcast. Thank you, Raj, for joining in.
Hey man, thanks man, thanks for inviting me.
Perfect. So let's start the podcast with just the story, like I said, about you dropping out of college. I've read a lot about, or everyone, it's not very common in India. People dropping out of college and having the guts to do that and follow through. Usually, if someone drops out of college, they might not have a very successful story, but yours is on the contrary, completely different. So, if you can just tell me the entire, just start around how and why did you drop out of college? What drove you to do that?
Okay, so first things first, I did not drop out of college because of guts or anything like that. It
Okay.
was basically sheer ego. So I was in my third year at MIT COE. I was pursuing mechanical engineering,
Yeah.
and I was doing okay. You know, you have a couple of backlogs which you can carry forward to the next semester.
Yeah.
Everything is going honky dory, and I had a couple of clashes with my then HOD
Yeah.
about the submissions and attendance, which was I was very active in my sports. I was very active in my social circle. I used to work for this UNESCO Youth Forum and all,
Hmm.
and it escalated really quickly,
Correct.
from one file not reaching in time to you're not attending to I'm not going to let you sit for a semester. And I'm like, so be it. If that is the case, then fair enough.
Wow.
I don't want to sit for the semester.
Hmm.
And I walk home and I tell my parents really proudly, my HOD is sort of, getting on my nerves, and I'm doing so much for the college in terms of social activities, in terms of my co-curriculars. My
Hmm.
grades are not too bad.
Yeah.
And yes, attendance is one issue, but shouldn't be like, such a determining
Hmm.
step.
Hmm.
And my father upped the ante. My father actually escalated the situation much higher. He like, if you want to stay in my house, you have to complete your engineering. You can't even think of dropping out and blah blah blah.
Yes. Typical
And
Indian
looking
parents.
back, yeah, and looking back, to be very honest,
Yeah.
if either my HOD or my father had built a bridge, I would have crossed it.
Yeah.
But since it got escalated to a point where I'm like, मेरे घर में रहना है तो engineering करो नहीं तो बाहर निकलो.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, so then the बाहर निकलो idea sounds good.
Wow.
And I was very naive back then. So I was just like, okay, I'll step out, I'll start something of my own.
Hmm.
So most dropout stories you hear are about people who want to start their own business and then they want to drop out and they plan it.
Hmm.
And my entrepreneurship journey is like, yes, I had it somewhere in my mind that I want to do something of my own,
Hmm.
which I would have been okay with doing it either way.
Hmm.
But the way situations escalated, I was like, now is the time. It's now or never.
Yeah.
And yeah, one thing led to another, and I ended up being a college dropout turned entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think people, there are two kinds of people. One who plan their company and then drop out. And then there's you who drop out and then plan their company. So I think
Yeah.
for you, it was the other way around. So
Yeah.
in terms of also, I think that discussion with your parents. So I have also had, my parents have also told me, there was that one discussion which I had with my parents where they were like, तुमको जो भी करना है बेटा engineering के बाद करो. So I told them I want to pursue dance, I want to do a lot of other things. So they said that जो भी करना है engineering के बाद करो. And 3D printing also actually I pursued after engineering. So I completely understand. Probably had I dropped out like you would have, there would have been a different story. But how did that discussion go with your parents? Like, were they? I understand it was your ego, and he said that घर पे मत रहो. What did you do next? Did you really walk out, or how did that part go?
So my father's quite disciplinary. He grew up in a military school. He went to
Mm.
SSPMS, which is recognized for his discipline.
Yeah.
He wanted to join the NDA, but because of a bike accident, he could not. So he always dreamt of being in the forces, and
Mm.
if not that, at least be an IPS. and he pursued to that goal. But through his MPSC, he became a class 1 officer, but not a IPS. He became a your administrative officer. But that's the discipline he grew up with, or that's the kind of person he is. So it was always my way or the highway with him. And when I told him that I want to pursue a career path which is different, he did not really appreciate it. And so to be very honest, I wasn't left with a lot of choice. It was either like, I put my head down, gulp my pride, and go to my HOD and mend my ways and beg for the semester and sit over there and all. And when it's a simple attendance issue, or at least I think it's a simple attendance issue. I could be wrong. But when it was where you're pushed against the wall, you sometimes come out fighting much harder than you would. So I was like, hey, chalo, then anyways, I want to start my business. So why later? Why not now? So I got into that, and I had no plan, to be very honest. I was just like, I somewhere in my head, I had this thing that I want to be in an innovation field, or I want to come up with a new technology. But at that point, I had absolutely no plan. So the conversation with my parents was very clear. It was my way or the highway, and I took the bait, or I played the gambit, and I was on the highway.
So you drop out of college. Now you're done. You're like, college nahi jana hai. So then what was your next step? Like, you, as you said, you were naive, you didn't know what you wanted to do. How did you start off this journey of entrepreneurship?
So the first thing that I did is the couple of friends that who knew me from a real long time. So I have a friend since my school who's always been with me. I had a friend in college. He was with me at MIT. Then I had a friend who was a junior to me. And there was this other guy that I used to play football with. So these are the 4-5 people that I immediately called up. And I'm like, this is what I'm doing. I'm stepping out. Everyone is like, you're fucking crazy. Don't do this. But ultimately, in the evening, everybody, like, how we have this charcha, some Sammelan or something kinds. Everyone, we have a small get together. Like, bro, my life and my career is changing tonight. And so tell me who's in and who's out. And these guys came in, and we were just like, what should we do? And I always had this idea at that time, because social networks were in vogue. And everybody wanted to start the next
This
Facebook.
was in what year?
So this was in 2010, 2011.
Okay, go on.
Yeah. So the academic year was 2010, 2011. I was in my third year mechanical engineering. And I think I was done with one semester, and it was the second semester that I did not want to sit for.
Understood.
Yeah. So I sat down with these guys, and I'm like, let's start something of our own. And random stuff, man. All of a sudden you realize everybody's very resourceful when you really want to put something. And people are like, hey, we can start a social network, and we can start our own college magazine, and we can, there's so many college events that we can get involved in. Then we can sell merchandise. That's how we can, come up with. So it's quite famous to have these back of the envelope calculations, or this tissue paper pitch. And that is exactly what we did. One piece of paper, one borrowed pen, and we came up with an idea, and we started something called as Rattle. Because Rattle is like, something that you shake things up. That was the entire concept.
Correct.
Yeah. And we booked this domain, rattleonline.com and all. And then we started with a website, which was like a blogging site and a social network, and people could interact over there. And our revenue module, because we couldn't sell ads, was to sell merchandise.
Correct.
And the website didn't really take off. We didn't really have a big user base or anything. Maybe 400, 500 at its peak. But the 2011 World Cup was around, and we made these real cricket themed t-shirts with silhouettes of Sachin Tendulkar and other players that were there. And those t-shirts did really well. We used to go to match screenings and college events, and literally out of a cardboard box. I had my sister's Kinetic then, so I used to take those cardboard boxes on that Kinetic with a friend sitting behind me. We used to stop outside a match screening or an event, and we used to sell t-shirts over there.
Really?
And it was a lot of fun. Randomly.
I think this is where you picked up a lot of your sales skills. I think you picked up out there. Letting go of that.
No, I was not. No, I was always charming.
Yeah, ever since I've known you, definitely.
No. But even as a kid, I was always a quick talker. I was always charming. But I knew my strength. So it's not like I picked up sales on the job. I knew how to sell, but I knew that.
Yeah.
And I was aware.
Self-aware, basically.
Yeah. So I focused on that, and we made a good amount of money selling. What do you say? Just picking up random T-shirts from different sports stores, getting a screen print on them, and going to events and just selling them out of a cardboard box. But we made decent amount of money, which could keep us afloat. And from that gig, we met a few companies. Or other people who are like, hey, your quality of your merchandise is really good, so will you do our corporate merchandise? And then one thing led to another. We were doing corporate merchandises, we were doing school merchandises, college merchandise, we were doing alumni gigs, and we just became a merchandise brand all over in a short span of a couple of months. So we started a college magazine or an online magazine, which tanked. To save it, we started t-shirts. And the t-shirts business did so well that we were doing t-shirts, pullovers, caps, mugs, whatnot, man. The last thing I remember, we were doing a corporate brochure before we got into graphics.
Corporate brochure?
Yeah, we did one a merchandise gig for one company, and then they were like, hey, your designs are really cool, so would you do a presentation and corporate brochure and everything? And ghanta we knew designing. But one thing that I knew is that if somebody gives you an opportunity, you say yes and you figure it out. I think Richard Branson said that. So I just said, yeah, we have a design team, we'll do it. And then I'm going and I'm calling my cousin up who was into graphics, and I'm like, will you do this for me? And she's like, dude, I study in NID. This is not what I do. And then I'm like, will you connect me to somebody who'll do this for me? And one thing led to another, and I found a graphic designer who made that brochure for us. And we started getting design gigs. So I went from merchandise to design in
and this entire website to t-shirts to merchandise in terms of website and everything. What was the time span for this?
12 to 18 months.
12 to 18 months. So during this period, you would quit and you like done multiple roles in as your company was pivoting from one thing to another till it worked.
To be honest, it wasn't a company. It was just a partnership firm. It was just 4 friends, people who had picked up 5,000-10,000 rupees as pocket money or something from home, put together. It was just very, scraping the bottom of the barrel, that whatever comes your way, you pick it up. You don't say no, and then you figure out how to do it on the job. The only good thing is that the 3-4 of us who were involved, we were people who had good values. We were people who were quality people. So we wouldn't compromise on what we gave to the end customer. So even if we didn't make a good margin on it, we would always deliver quality. And whether it was a t-shirt, whether it was hoodies, whether it was just you go to a digital print offset guy and he tells you that I can use this quality of paper or that quality of paper, and we'll always take premium. Irrespective of what margins we're making, and that is something that worked in our favor. Like now looking back, I know what went right and what went wrong. Also, there were a few things that we made mistakes, but at then we didn't knew this. We were just doing what we were, good at, and that's what helped us.
I think during that period, always just going through it, keeping that one thought in mind that you need to deliver quality no matter what you do. And now that you look back, you realize that was the main thing that helped you propel into multiple other things also.
Yeah, like in 9 odd years that I've done business, I've probably lost only 2 or 3 clients.
Wow, that's an impressive, very impressive statistic.
and out of those 3, 2 because they shut shop.
Wow, that's an interesting statistic. So, you've done t-shirts, website, t-shirts, then design and various other things. And then when did you move from that partnership 4 friends to a company? What was that transition for you?
So what happened is that this transition of these 12 to 18 months where we went from one gig to another, it was basically gigs. You used to get, there were a couple of weeks you're working hard and you're making some money, and there are a couple of weeks you're doing nothing. You're just chilling at home, trying to figure out what to do next. So it was quite a dynamic phase. But in this phase, what was happening is my friends who were with me, some of them were in a 3-year course, some of them were in a 4-year course. So they were getting done with their graduation. And they were lingering upon the question of what comes next in their career. So one of my friends, he got a job offer. He wanted to pursue that in education. He got a good opportunity with a US-based academy or institute which does a lot of these exchange programs. So he wanted to pursue that. Another friend of mine who was a partner, he wanted to join his father's business. He wanted to pursue that. So it was just the two of us, and we are trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah.
And then that is the time it struck me that, hey, so I really wanted to take an initiative and do something. So we came together and we did it.
Yeah.
And we got some kind of a, say, early success, so we could stay afloat.
Yeah.
But until this does not become like a proper structured organization, it won't really go forward.
Yeah.
So I started taking advice from, I had a friend who was a CA. I had another friend who was, company secretary. I had a few seniors who, had started their own businesses. So I started reaching out to people at that point, ki like, chalo, I'm doing something. I'm making money, but it's a gig economy. I need to get serious. I need to create an organization.
Yeah.
And then that's when the entire idea came that, you need to have like a proper private limited, and you need to have register your trademark, and you need to have a proper a detailed project report, and you need to approach investors. And then what are the good parts of your business? What are the bad parts of your business? Do a SWOT analysis. Then I had this gentleman who was a dean in our institute, but I had a good rapport with him. He told me something called as McKinsey's 7S, and that it really intimidated me.
Yeah.
Like when I started reading that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
there was all jargons, and I'm like, how does this even apply to me?
What was it about?
So McKinsey's 7S is one of these corporate things where you have 7 S's literally, like, the structure, the system, the staffing pattern, the strategy, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And he was like, you need to have these some core principles before you build an organization. You need to have a business model canvas. You need to have a financial plan.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, I'm the bloke who left engineering because it was getting on my nerves, to start a college magazine, which turned into a t-shirts gig, which turned into a graphic design gig, and now I have a couple of organizations that are giving me websites and brochures and merchandise deals. And what the hell is this corporate structure?
Yeah.
Like to be honest, the more I interacted with that gentleman, the more intimidated I got with business. So I tried to keep things simple. I believe I have a good grasp of things, but not everything is meant for all the time.
Yeah.
There's some things you focus on, and you need to know what is a distraction, or what you can't work on in that moment.
Correct.
So that's the time we started getting a bit structured, when people started graduating and getting that curveball question that everybody throws, that what do you want plan to do next? So ये rattle वगैरह ठीक है, हाँ ये rattle वगैरह ठीक है, पर ये pocket money के लिए ठीक है. This is not a business.
Correct.
And I tried to reinvent the organization. I made it a private limited. We became a serious design firm. We started getting branding gigs. We did really well. We had some contracts from really reputed organizations, like Bharat Forge had a football team that they had launched. So they did a lot of the brand activations through us. And that is one client I lost because that football team shut down. And then I had a couple of other institutes that we were working with. So at that time, I tried to structure it and formalize it. That is the time when it really became a business.
Yeah, it grew basically. So I think in the initial few months or the years that you had, it was very unstable. It just kept going up and down in terms of some months you have work, some months you don't. And then now you wanted some sort of stability to the entire process.
Yeah. So like in the first year and a half, there was a semester pattern. Like you have events, you have work, you don't have events, you don't have work.
Correct. Yeah, and I think bringing in that stability, forming a company, and as you said, the dean who shared that information with you, when you're just starting your company, I think when you burden yourself with so much of knowledge, then it just seems impossible to do. Rather than that, you just start with, okay, this is the team, this is what we want to do, and then just go step by step. That really, in my opinion, helps rather than trying to do everything at once, as opposed to doing it step by step.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge as an entrepreneur is to being true to yourself. You know your strengths, you know your weaknesses, and the entire world will try and tell you how you should cover up for your weaknesses, which is good, which is the direction you should take. But you're going to really excel if you focus on your strengths.
Yeah.
And that is something that early on I had the confidence to do. So I focused on what I'm good at. If I'm good at communication, I focused on communication. If I'm not good at administration, then I got in team members who will man the desk and get the job done.
Yeah.
So I'm a horrible person when it comes to management. I don't follow up. I don't get stuff done.
Yeah.
So I've always had a partner or somebody who does the office work, who like acts like the CEO and gets the job done. gets behind everyone and make sure that everything is in place. And I only focus on business development. I only focus on promoting the organization, getting more and more revenue.
Correct. No, I think that's very interesting. To be honest, like I think that is one of the early times when we both connected. When I reached out to you, I was not very self-aware when it came to my strengths. I was at a point where I was trying to do a little bit of everything. As a co-founder, you do accounts, you do operations, marketing, a bit of everything. So during that period, I
Yeah.
think was when we'd spoken, and I think having that self-awareness which you spoke of, you had that clarity when you spoke of it even at the start of the podcast. So I mean, you've had it since the beginning, and that's one skill which has helped you get to where you are probably a little earlier than what would have happened had you not had that clarity in that case.
Yeah, but it's also a two-way street. Like sometimes you also learn on the job. You'll get to know yourself better. And then every time I look back, I'm like, oh, if I knew this 2 years back, I would have done much better.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
so so even though maybe from a third point of view, you might see that hey, this is something that he knew from day one. So it's
yeah,
not true. I also knew a lot of things on the job.
yeah.
But I've been very adaptable. Like I'm been very quick to pivot.
Correct. Correct. So also now that we come to this stage, I just want to highlight one part which you mentioned to me. There are two things which you've done in during your college years. One was the UNESCO thing which you were doing. Could you tell me a little more about that? What was that about?
So, so I was pursuing my engineering in MIT, and MIT has this UNESCO chair conferred upon them,
Hmm.
and they do a lot of these activities at that time. What so today there's something called as 17 Sustainable Development Goals. When I was in college, there were 8 Millennium Development Goals.
Hmm.
So they used to give us a mandate as to that these are these 8 Millennium Development Goals, and you need to do different activities. So whether it is to help people who are in abject poverty, or whether it is universal education, so helping people who do not have access to education, whether it's not just children or young adults, but even older people, adults who do not have access to education, we used to go reach out to them. We used to do a lot of environmental related activities. Those were some of my favorites, whether it was cleanliness drives, tea plantations, or just having conferences or workshops to create awareness about our environment and
Yeah.
sustainability. So there were these 8 broad goals that we used to work on, and one of the biggest opportunities that I got through that is at MIT we put up a proposal for something like a student parliament.
Hmm.
Our proposal was a small, like a student-driven initiative that we should call different students from different campuses and have
Yeah.
them, like you know, you have this MUN where you represent different
Yeah.
parts of the world. How instead of that have a student parliament where you actually have students represent their home states, because
Correct.
MIT and Pune has a very diverse youth culture where you have
Yeah.
children coming in, or kids coming in from different parts of India.
Mm.
So we wanted to do that, but the organization really put their weight behind and they scaled it up, and it ended up become this grand Bharatiya Chhatra Sansad with 5,000 students coming from all over India, and dignitaries like former President APJ Abdul Kalam and Sri Sri Ravi Shankar and Dalai Lama and Shashi Tharoor, and because I was the student head of the UNESCO Youth Forum that was at MIT, I got a good opportunity to interact with these people,
Mm.
and that did two things. It did really well for my confidence and the overall exposure that I had. Also, it did really well for my ego. So when my
Yeah.
father was, or my HOD was like, you know, you're too engrossed in other things
Mm.
and you don't want to pursue your academics, so what the hell are you doing? I
Yeah.
was I sort of had that self confidence or ego to
Mm.
tread a different path, because if I didn't have that, maybe I wouldn't do what I was doing right now.
Mm. Quite interesting. So UNESCO also gave you a different exposure, and you also mentioned that you were the captain of your football team, right?
Yeah, at my college, we had a good football culture. We used to have MIT Summit and all,
Yeah.
and it really helped to play over there. Then I used to represent a club, Deccan 11.
Wow.
So actually, I was much more prouder of wearing my club jersey than my school or college
Yeah.
jersey, because I have given more years over there. And
Yeah.
even like I'm very grateful to my teammates over there or my coach. We had Sunil sir, Anil sir.
Mm.
You know, they really helped instill a lot of confidence and self belief in me. So
Mm-hmm.
to be very honest, I was a shit ass player. Like when it comes to the technical aspects of the game, I had a poor first touch.
Mm.
My scoring strike rate or ratio was horrible.
Yeah.
If I'm 1-on-1 in front of the goal 3 times in a game, I'll end up at the back of the net once.
Yeah.
But I was quick on my feet,
Yeah.
and I used to create more opportunities. So while I wasn't a very attractive player to look at, but I used to create 6 or 7 opportunities for myself, end up scoring 1 or 2 goals.
Yeah.
And hey, at the end of the day, the scoreboard has no asterisks.
Wow.
So whether you score a good goal or a bad goal, they all count.
Yeah, exactly. So I think
So
no, go on. Complete it.
yeah. I'm really grateful to my coaches over there,
Yeah.
because this one thing that comes from my my personal philosophy, comes from my game or my football, is my coach used to always tell me, if you're bad at something, fine, you can work on it in the longer run. But if you're out there in the pitch representing your team, you just need to focus on your strengths. If you're bad at something at that point in time while you're in the game, in the match, you can't work on it.
Yeah.
You can work on it in the practice.
Yeah.
And that sort of became my philosophy. Like, I work really hard to improve my aspects where I'm weak and I'm not good enough, or I feel I need to catch up. But when I'm out there, I only focus on my strengths. I only play to my strengths. And like I said, when you score, man.
Wow, that's quite interesting. I mean, that's very profound kind of advice he gave you. That when you're in the game, focus on your strengths. You can work on the rest in practice. Wow.
Yeah.
That's quite a beautiful thought. So, what my point of bringing both these things up is that, do you think that you picked up a lot of leadership skills through these extracurricular activities that you were doing outside of your academics?
Yeah, I'll ask you a question over here. Have you been to academic institution in India?
Yes, I have.
Is there any scope you're going to pick up any leadership skill or any kind of personality by sitting cooped up in a classroom with 60 other students while the professors are lecturing? Yeah, so I think we have a very binary kind of academic system where again just adding to my point, there's no asterisks on the scoreboard. So you score the marks, you're great. You don't score the marks, you're nothing.
Yeah.
They don't care how your personality is. They don't care what things you're passionate about. They don't care about anything else. So it's all about getting all your subjects, even if you have some good subjects and bad subjects, but all your subjects are totaled up and there's a percentage at the end of the day, and that percentage is like a label stuck to you.
Yeah.
So though I did really well academically, at least in my engineering till second year when I was still interested in it. So I don't have any complaints from that point of view, but I definitely know that you don't pick up anything in our conventional education system in India by going to the classroom. So definitely my sports helped me a lot. It gave me the confidence, it gave me the self-belief. And then what I did with UNESCO, very early on, I got involved in social activities. I picked up the philosophy that you can do a lot of things for yourself, but still feel hollow. But even if you do a few little things for other people, it will make you feel more complete.
Wow, yeah.
And that has defined me as a person. Like even in my bad times, or even when I'm struggling, or even when I've been down, like in business, there are days you don't have a lot of money. It may look very glamorous and very good to look at. You have a lot of trade receivables, so you can go in the market and say that so much money is pending, or people owe me so much. But at that time in your pocket, sometimes you just have 1 500 rupee note. But even then, say if I'm out with somebody, or if somebody needs help, or I'm still generous, because that just became a big part of who I am. So working with the UNESCO Youth Forum really made me understand that until you don't live for others, or until you don't create a social impact, you're not really going anywhere.
Wow, yeah. I think this belief which you have of service to others also has helped you multiply your network. Like personally, you are one of the kind of people who I know has a very wide network. I have personally reached out to you for at multiple instances when I needed some help. So that I think has really helped you multiply your network and diversify it across any sector. You name it, and you would have had a contact in that sector.
So definitely yes, because that's one aspect of my life where because I'm very giving, or I get involved in people's things, or I really help them out in a selfless manner, does come back to me multifold. So even if I don't have an objective end to it, that chalo, somebody wants to do something and I'm just a part of it, helping them out, co-create something. It may not align with my goals, or it may not give me something in return. But yeah, that has definitely helped me reach out to more people, socialize, get a good network. Either that or I'm very charming. So I don't know, one of the two.
I think you're
I don't
looking
know
for the
what.
latter. But yeah,
I don't know what it is.
yeah,
I'm still reflecting on that.
yeah.
But I do definitely pride myself that yeah, there are a lot of people that I can very easily reach out to, and they are kind enough to entertain whatever I ask them to. So yeah.
That's great. So now let's get back to the part where we were talking about you building the companies. In terms
Yeah.
of the story till where we've covered, right now you've formed your private limited organization, and you guys were doing some branding gigs. Where did the company head from there?
Okay. So I told you one British entrepreneur, Richard Branson, and his quote that, when somebody gives you an opportunity, you say yes and then you
Yeah,
figure it out.
figure it out.
Mhm.
Yeah.
There's another British, not entrepreneur, British prime minister who has influenced me tremendously is Winston Churchill.
Hmm.
And what he says is success is just moving from failure to failure with no loss in enthusiasm.
Yeah.
And
That's
most of the gigs that I've done, they've been marginally successful.
hmm.
They've kept me afloat. They've paid the dues, they paid the salaries, they paid the rent, but we didn't really make any headway in terms of, yeah, like, come on, let's be honest. When I was 21 and I started a business, I wanted to be a millionaire by the time I was 25.
Yeah.
So when I was 20, when I was 25 and I was broke, that was really like an ouch moment. I was like, hey, what the hell am I doing?
Yeah.
I have I have I have some 14 odd employees, and I'm working out of my dad's rooftop. The same dad who was against me joining business, so wanted to kick me out of the house, and now he's my landlord.
Yeah.
And when I was 25 and I was reflecting on hey, what all I'm doing,
Hmm.
I figured out that there is some gap.
Hmm.
There's branding, events, social media, websites. It was good enough to pay the dues, but there was a glass ceiling. And until then, also from when I started at 21 till in these 4 years, a lot of people caught on to this buzz, of merchandising and doing social media gigs and then doing websites. So everybody was dropping prices. Like everybody was making it. Every new entrant came in and made it cheaper. Every new entrant
Correct.
came in and made it cheaper. And most of your clients are like, hey, giving me this quality of service. Okay, maybe the next guy is not giving me the same quality of service, but he's making it so much more
Yeah.
cheaper that I would take that risk.
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, and so I had anticipated that we won't, like, I could retain my clients, I could retain my business, so I didn't lose business that way. But I had anticipated that I can't be in this environment for far too long.
Hmm.
And one of the alternatives that I was looking for, because at that point my grandfather also had feeling health. He had reached 94, 95.
Hmm.
And me and my father used to visit him much often. So I used to spend a sizable amount of time at my native place, which I used to do in my childhood, in my school days. But then once I started my 10th and my 12th and my engineering, and you have your football and your classes,
Yeah.
somewhere it got neglected. But
Hmm.
then once me and my father was spending a lot of time with my grandfather, that really helped my family also, because we all came closer together. And
Yeah.
then I started understanding the responsibilities that I have over there with the land and
Yeah.
with the farm that we have. And I started engaging myself in activities over there. I experimented with organic farming there,
Hmm.
and it was miserable. It was miserable because I got the right kind of produce, but because we are not using any pesticides, anything, I could not really get the crop to the market.
Correct. Where is
Most
your
of it was eaten.
family land, if I may ask?
It's a small village called Sansar.
Hmm.
It's around 114 kilometers from Pune.
Hmm.
It's closer to a town called Baramati, which is quite popular in Maharashtra.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's where
And
my
what are the
land
kind
is.
of crops
And
that you were growing?
so traditionally we grow sugarcane and banana plantation, and we do wheat, a bit of harbara, onion and all. But I started experimenting with vegetables, mostly salad greens and all.
Hmm.
And I didn't really do too well so I started dwelling on other things like soilless farming, hydroponics, aquaponics. I
Hmm.
started reading up about this. And while my organization Rattle was still functioning, I started devoting some time and money towards getting into soilless farming. So that really intrigued me.
Hmm.
And in 2015, 2016, I had a breakthrough wherein I figured a certain way of going about it.
Hmm.
But I felt that we can't just take 1 year or 18 months of knowledge and create a product and go out in the market. So
Hmm.
we tried collaborating with a few people. And that was, I think, a big blunder on my part, because I trusted a few people who I shouldn't have at that point. I lost some money on it. I lost a year and a half on it. And the money part I recovered. Business was good. But the year and a half that I lost on it is something that I still regret, because we would have been far ahead by now.
Mm.
And once we had a prototype ready, like it took me from 2015 till I think almost 2018. So a year and a half I wasted on a certain somebody that really pisses me off even till day.
Yeah.
And then the next year and a half I cleaned up the mess and the financial mess that was created, got the ship steady, started with new prototypes, and then from scratch we ended up creating what is the Growspire. And
Correct.
that's how we've also we've known each other, but we worked together on that project.
Yeah.
You did the 3D printing part of our first prototype.
Yeah.
You're kind enough to travel with us to our vendors to
Yeah.
get the designs and everything finalized. So that is a business that we got into in around 2018, 2019.
Correct.
And then I realized at some point that, hey, I can let go of my branding and marketing business. So we started winding up Rattle. I still had a lot of AMCs from contracts that were revolving around websites and ERPs and software products that we had developed. So we were continuing on that, still delivering them service while we were taking an exit.
Correct.
And then we had a smooth transition from that business into Growspire, which is into vertical farming now.
Correct. So I think when you started this out, Growspire, I think the idea began much earlier, and you started executing it in 2015, which is when the entire soilless farming interest developed for you. Is that how you began?
So the organic farming interest was there since quite some time. I was trying to experiment with it, but I wasn't really getting anywhere in terms of productivity and making it commercially viable. So I also thought of maybe I should just get into trading, but then that is not who I am. Like, I'm not comfortable with just taking from Paul and giving it to Peter. I feel that there has to be some value addition, some innovation, something that I would be proud to say that, hey, I did that. So to be very honest, that if you ask me my business philosophy, yes, profit and loss is important. Keeping track of your money is important, but it's a tool. Money is a tool. It is not the it's not the end goal. It's a means to the end. The end obviously has to be innovation or legacy rather. You know that when you look at something, or when people look at something, they should be able to say that, hey, this guy created it. So I've always been driven by that. And then vertical farming is a new field. It's even a new field in India now. There are not many people who are into it. And I found that niche. I worked really hard towards it. Here I realized that I come from a lot of privilege, coming from a traditional farming ecosystem, coming from a background where you're a landowner, coming from a background where my father, my grandfather were hardcore farmers. They were in the agrarian economy. My father was into sugar cooperatives. So all of these things maybe were not planned out or aligned since the beginning. Like I told you, most of my journey has been on the fly. I thought that was the right decision at that point in time, and I just took it. And then I made that decision right by working really hard towards it. And Growspire took that journey. And today, we were in 30 odd households across Pune. Wow. We have a couple of commercial setups put out. And if COVID wasn't in place, we would have expanded to 4 odd cities in India. But better late than never. I think in January 2021 or Feb 2021, we should be having channel partners across India. So that is something where I would really come into my own and feel really proud that, hey, I created a product and the product is now out there in multiple cities.
It's quite interesting. Now so you and I know a lot about Growspire. So if you can just briefly explain what Growspire is, because not a lot of people know what vertical farming is, aquaponics, there's a lot of confusion. So if you can just briefly tell us what Growspire is actually.
So I'll briefly tell you what problem Growspire solves. So most people are interested into gardening. And some of those people are interested in gardening exotic vegetables, salad greens that they can consume. But gardening by itself is a pain in the ass because you have to deal with soil, which once you water or it rains, it becomes mucky. Your entire terrace or your balcony becomes a mess. Then if you want to grow organically, you're basically talking about dealing with some kind of cow dung or goat feces or whatnot. And then that smells. It's again a mess. And then you really need to have a green thumb. Like, plants are very sensitive. I've never yet figured out this. Like, you go to any building in Pune, Mumbai, you will see a random plant growing from a crack in the wall. But when you really put a plant in a potted mix and give it proper manure and all, it will die.
It doesn't grow where you
So
want it to grow, basically.
yeah, yeah. So many people have a struggle with this,
Hmm.
and that is the problem we solve. So if you want to grow something on your own,
Hmm.
if you're so that's the thing. Like if you're inspired to grow,
Hmm.
so that's where Growspire comes in.
Wow.
Like you don't need to know gardening, you don't need to know how to manage the soil, you don't need to know how to fertilize, you don't need to know how to water the plant. If you can switch on a plug,
Yeah.
and if you can make a pinch with your fingers and take some powder or mix and put it in the water, that's all you need to know.
Wow.
So that is the problem we're solving. We've created a vertical garden
Hmm.
wherein you can grow 50 odd plants in a small base of 4 square feet,
Hmm.
and you may be into gardening, you may not be into gardening, but it's very easy to manage.
Correct. I think this is quite interesting also, the way you explained the problem you were solving in terms of the entire challenges around having your own garden, trying to grow stuff at your place,
Yeah.
and with the entire amount of pesticides that are now being put on the vegetables that we consume, we don't realize that. But there is another, I would say, health benefit also to have vegetables growing in your own house. So, funnily enough, 3 days back there was a friend who came over, and this is
Mm-hmm.
one of the lockdown benefits. Probably it's good for your business. So she and her husband, they've started growing vegetables at their house. So it's a little difficult. Bombay, the houses are small, spaces are even smaller. There are no balconies like you have in Pune and everything. But so they have their house, they've set up like some 10, 12 plants, and they're like meticulously taking care of it. And now because it's work from home, they are able to take care of it. And when I suggested to them the Grow Spire was when they were really interested. They were like, yeah, at some point of time, as their house gets bigger and they get some proper space, they could probably think of that because they know the problems associated with trying to grow vegetables or trying to grow something in your own house. And the way they were explaining it, that they had tomatoes which they grew and they plucked it out and they had it. So I think that's another experience that you were able to create through the product.
Yeah, I think the experience is the most important part,
Yeah.
because I'll be honest with you that when you grow something of your own and then
Mm.
you consume it, that dopamine hit that you're going to get,
Yeah.
you're not going to get it from anything else.
Yeah.
And it's quite addictive. Like if you know people who are into gardening, they're like avid gardeners. It starts with
Yeah.
4 or 5 pots and it ends up with 400.
Exactly.
So we help people accelerate that journey,
Hmm.
50 plants at a time.
Yeah.
And one major part is that gardening by itself is very therapeutic. So
Hmm.
there are the additional benefit that you're getting pesticide free or chemical free food to eat is one part of it.
Hmm.
There are many organic brands that claim that, but you may not have that guarantee, or you have that guarantee because you're growing it yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also there's a lot of scientific research, and people know this for a fact also, that when you interact with plants, when you interact with animals, it really boosts your morale, it really reduces your stress levels.
Hmm.
And in the Growspire, you're growing plants, and also if you're doing aquaponics, so there
Yeah.
are two ways. One is hydroponics, you put in organic mix into the water, and
Hmm.
one is aquaponics, where you have live fish in the water, like an aquarium.
Yeah.
So when you have fish at home and you have plants growing, it's actually really great as a stress relief, or
Yeah.
the therapeutic effect it has on it. And most of the buyers that I have right now are older people who buy this
Hmm.
because they want that kind of experience. They can't do gardening anymore. They can't bend down. They don't want to get into all of that hassle.
Yeah.
So this system is like a easy mix for them.
Hmm.
And then the exact opposite spectrum is very young people,
Yeah.
like college going students and all, who are like, hey, I want to get into gardening but I don't know how.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting mix. We have very young people and we have very old people, and they're right into gardening and they're using the Growspire.
Wow, that's brilliant. And the four cities that you mentioned. So currently, for everyone watching, you are in Pune. What are the
Yeah.
cities that you are planning on expanding?
So the first lead that we got is from Bangalore, because Bangalore does have a very vibrant culture when it comes to gardening and
Absolutely, yeah.
having your own space and all. Many people still stay in small, not apartments per se, like these what you call as a koti, or what you call as a makan.
Yeah, yeah,
Like you have a small space behind your house just for yourself, or
yeah.
you
You
have
have
a small
sort of a
rooftop
backyard
just
and
for yourself.
everything. Yeah,
Yeah, sort of a backyard or a rooftop which is attached to your apartment. So
correct.
that kind of culture is common between cities like Pune and Bangalore. So we
Mm.
have a lot of leads from Bangalore. The
Mm.
obvious is Mumbai.
Yeah.
Mumbai is close from Pune, and many of my customers have friends, relatives in Mumbai who have seen the system at their place, and then they call us and they're like, "When are you delivering? And when are you starting?" So
Yeah.
for Mumbai, we're coming up with an interesting indoor solution because you won't have a balcony or a rooftop, so you'll need something which has a LED light or something attached to it.
Yeah.
And then there's Delhi NCR, and through Delhi NCR, Chandigarh. So
Correct.
in north, those two cities are there. So in Pune, we are quite established right now, and there are 4 other cities we are going for.
Hmm.
And recently, I've been getting a lot of call from Surat,
Okay.
but they want the hydroponic version. They want it without fish. So yeah, we're working on that as well.
Wow, that's quite interesting. I think there's a lot of exciting stuff which is coming up with the company in the coming 6 months.
As soon as Corona's over, man, right now I'm just worried every time I
Yeah.
plan like, hey, I'm going to go to Mumbai and start doing this, and then I'm like, Mumbai starts are going up.
Yeah.
Then I'm like, I literally have tickets booked for Delhi right now, so I'm going to be in Delhi for a week, and I'm going to be shitting bricks. I'm like, oh my
It's like
god,
really,
Delhi is the
really,
Corona capital right now.
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so it's been a little topsy turvy.
Yeah.
And the supply chain is also a little dicey. People show up to work, people don't show up to work. That kind of stuff is going on. But yeah, we'll sail through. We'll be fine.
Yeah, absolutely. I think once this unlock has happened, people have really resumed back and they've accepted it as a part like, okay, it's going to be there for a while until the vaccine comes out and everything. And now people are at least moving on with their lives and trying to do what best they can do with whatever is there.
Yeah, and Amitabh Bachchan has been kind enough to spare time and attend all our phone calls and
Yeah,
tell us, "Jab tak
absolutely.
dawai nahi, tab tak dilai nahi." So yeah.
Yeah, it's really irritating. So I start my day with Amitabh Bachchan. It used to be prior, it used to be my mom and dad. Now it's like I listen to him first and then my day begins. But yeah.
Prior to Corona, I used to like that guy. Yeah. Now I don't like him anymore.
It's really irritating. Like that first call you do, and the sad part is that the ring happens after that. So you need
Yeah.
to have the patience to go through that. So
Yeah. There's the other person doesn't even know you're calling.
yeah, exactly. But quite interesting, Raj. With Growspire growing to this scale right now, and you're expanding to multiple cities in the country. I wish you and the entire team all the best. I really look forward to. I've told you this that someday there is some international distributorship of yours which I will take up, putting it out there. But that is
I definitely
yeah.
because I'll be very candid with you. So I am very active on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So LinkedIn and Instagram are, I think, great platforms if you really want good leads. If you have a very good like you have to pitch differently, like the professional aspect of a product and the utility value I really can showcase on LinkedIn, and the design aspect of the product and how like it's just very Instagram worthy. Like it's
Yeah.
just something that we'll be proud of to look at. Like, oh,
Yeah.
there's strawberry growing and oh, there's lettuce growing. So I get a lot of leads from Instagram and LinkedIn, and most of those leads are not from India.
Yeah.
And obscure places, like the most obvious you get from Dubai and Hong Kong and Singapore and Australia and Canada, because in these places soilless farming or vertical farming is already popular.
Yeah.
But people reaching out from Spain and France and Bulgaria, and quite a lot of interesting stuff going on. So
That's quite
I'm
interesting.
just waiting for this Corona wave to die down, travel to resume, and we've also been able to turn our product into more DIY, because initially we used to send people to install it, but during the coronavirus we realized that hey, maybe sending people to install at someone's house is not the wise thing, and also it won't make our product very scalable. So now we're making it in a very DIY model where you can order it over Amazon and it'll come in a box, and somebody as old as my nephew, like a 8 or 10-year-old kid, can assemble it without any tools, without any special tools. Yeah. So we want to keep it that simple, and we want to target a very young market, because that is where we see the future.
I also would like to bring to everyone's notice the first discussion you and I had. It was again a late night conversation over a phone, and you were explaining the design concept to me of Growspire. So I'll put it up in the video for everyone to see what the product looks like. And I remember that when we had our first few discussions, your last point before you concluded the call, it went completely technical. Like, okay, this is the kind of weight that is going to be there. These are the number of pots we need. This is the kind of circulation in terms of water is going to happen. So all of that was done. And your last point was, okay, but I need, let's say, a 5 or an 8-year-old, even my nephew, to be able to take it out of a box and assemble it. So I think since then you had that clarity that no matter what age the person or the customer is, it should be very easy to use. and now through COVID, you've adopted this entire DIY system. So I think that would also help it grow much faster in leaps and bounds now that you all have adopted this. Send it home, assemble it yourself, and the product is designed in that way.
Yeah, like when I discussed with you, it was a philosophy. COVID gave me 5 to 6 months of free time to make it a reality.
Exactly.
And yeah, I think any product has to be that simple. I think YouTube is very popular because it's so kids friendly.
Yeah.
So it's a no-brainer that adult can use it. And any product which is kept in mind that a child can do it by himself or by herself.
Yeah.
Obviously, I would want somebody to supervise them.
Yeah.
But having said that, point being that if it is designed in such a manner that it is possible for them to do it by themselves, I think then absolutely anyone can do it.
And I think that we in India are very used to having someone assemble it and be like कि हाँ मतलब product आया तो उसके साथ कोई assemble करने भी बिठाने भी आ जाएगा. But outside of India, I don't think they have that culture. There they have more of a. I think people will welcome it much more when they have a DIY rather than someone coming and putting it up. So I think that would also.
Yeah, we as Indians are damn privileged and damn lazy, man.
I think COVID
I think I
privilege away from all of us. This 4 months.
No. As long as we have this concept of Mother India, where your mom hands you everything in your hand and you're the Raja Beta, I think that's not going to change. So and I say that from a lot of privilege. My mom also pampers me a lot.
Yeah.
And not just me, even my siblings. Not just that I'm exclusively recipient of some undue treatment, but yeah, you are there, your sisters there. I know how your mom also treats you.
Absolutely.
So as long as we have this culture where everything is handed to us, we're never going to learn.
Never going to change.
Yes.
But yeah, so in conclusion, now that we've heard your entire story, before we go to the last section of the podcast, I'd like to ask you one thing. Like with Growspire growing to a certain level now and it's scaling up, where do you see it? Let's say in the next 5 to 10 years. Like where do you see yourself in the next 5 to 10 years in terms of an entrepreneur?
So these are two different questions because where I see the company and where I see myself is aligned, but they are a little different for a simple reason that where I see the company is that I believe that every person should have the right and access to clean food. And if we can create tools to empower them to grow their own food, that would be fabulous. Now you come from the 3D printing background and there's a lot of buzz about people being able to download their food and print their own food. But I would much rather have them growing it themselves because that is real empowerment. That way they're not depending on a multinational corporation to deliver them everything. The real empowerment happens when people are having the right tools. And if you see as from an anthropological point of view, what humans really need to know is to be able to filter water, to be able to farm food, and to be able to create a shelter. If we can do this, we can survive anything. We can even survive a nuclear holocaust. So point A, where I see this company is that we want to be a design innovation firm, which will help people co-create tools. Because when we are creating a tool and they use it and then they give us feedback and they engage with it, we will also make the tool better and better, like with their help. So I wanted to be like an open source platform where people can create their own tabletop farms and their balcony farms and their rooftop farms. So that is the direction I want the company to take. Where I see myself in that journey, I do not consider myself as absolutely brilliant who can take this company from 0 to $1 trillion. I do want to rely on professionals. I do want to rely on people who are smarter than me, wiser than me, financially more astute than me. And I want professionals to come in this organization, make it better. So I would like to take it to a point where I'm a third partner. So I would like to take it to a point where my third is worth $1 billion. So the organization is valued at 3. I can take it to that point, bring in professionals and let them take that company or the organization on a journey of its own. And with the billion is a target that I want to reach, wherein I can take an exit and I can start getting into philanthropic work. Because there's a lot of work that I also want to do at grassroots level with conventional soil-based farming. Because hey, not everyone is going to live in an urban space and not everyone is going to require a vertical farm. For people who still do have access to a conventional farm, I do want to engage with those people also. And that has to be a more of a philanthropic thing than like a commercial thing. So to answer your question, I want this organization immediately means over the next couple of years to reach a point where it's worth $3 billion. I can get $1 billion exit. And when I get a $1 billion exit, I can get onto a philanthropic initiative and work with people in the semi-urban or the rural parts of the country. So, so these are the goals I see for myself and the organization.
Wow. I think that's covering that aspect which you explained right now is through the company which will keep growing with or without you beyond a certain point. It would cover one side of farming, which is like in your own house and soil less. And on the other hand, when you would involve yourself on the other hand, overall, I think the entire agri-tech sector is something that you would be very interested or you would be engaged in.
No. The agri-tech sector will take its own dimension. It will move on. I want to go into agriculture. Because I believe, culture is better than tech.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you so much. And now we'll go to the last section of the podcast. And I'm going to ask you some 3 questions, which I would like you to answer as shortly as possible. A sentence would do. The first is, any advice you would like to give to someone who's dropping out of their college?
If you are going to drop out of your college and start something of your own, then you have to be willing to do whatever it takes.
Okay, beautiful. Second is, if someone wants to get into agriculture or agri-tech, there are 2 different things which we discussed right now, but someone wants to get into agriculture, what is it that you would guide them? Like someone who's been in the space, which direction would you want people to head in or guide them to?
This is a very diverse field. So I would suggest that you basically start with the soil, because you would get to the root of the problem. You would get to learn all the parameters. And then when you move to soilless mediums or other mediums, it becomes easier.
Beautiful. And considering you have an experience of 10 years now, a decade of being an entrepreneur, what is that one thing? I think one thing is 2 less. You can say 3 also. What are those 3 things that probably have pushed you through these times, or what are those 3 key things which you've learned and you'd like to share with budding entrepreneurs?
So one thing that I believe is that it's good to be humble to yourself in terms of your work ethic and everything, but you need to have an ego, because if you do not have an ego, if you're not competitive, you will lose your edge. And I don't need 3 things. That's the only thing that I'll want anyone to focus on.
Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for doing this so late in the night also. It has been a pleasure interacting with you, and I think people who have reached it till this part of the podcast are going to walk away with a lot of knowledge. So thank you so much for joining us once again, and I'll see you around. Probably get you on the podcast next time for another topic, another day, another topic.